through Friday in the mornings. Grocery stores end up culling food throughout the day. So if a food bank picks up in the morning, then, whatever gets tossed out in the evening isn't going to be picked up. Also, weekends, other kind of gaps like that. So what we did was we created this model to basically fill the gaps left behind by our larger food bank and specifically focus on healthier foods like uncut fruits and vegetables. I say uncut because, also we're, when we talk about food safety, we all have been trained in food safety, but we're not dealing with prepared foods currently. We're dealing with whole produce that's not going to go bad. And what that enables us to do is put more resources into this produce that's healthier and easier for communities to use, and also we get kind of more per pickup that way. So we're a very niche organization in that way. I wanted to touch base briefly on retailers. We found that working with retailers is really with any of our work, it comes down to building relationships. We want to work with grocery stores personnel to find solutions that work for them. We found that people working at grocery stores are very busy people, and the idea behind this was to make it as easy as possible for them to donate. So what their employees do is put all the food aside, and they usually store it in a cooler once it's been cold, and then we'll bring it out when our volunteers show up, and then our volunteers sort through the food. We work with them to find days and hours that work for them so that, their receiver's there and they're ready to pick it up, or they're ready for us to come so that we can pick it up. So this is a picture of me rolling out a large cart at a grocery store out of the coolers and into the loading dock where I'm going to load it up and take it somewhere right away. And then I briefly put this on here, and I'm not going to go into detail about this, but when you, Athena, mentioned building relationships early on, it made me think of our food waste audit. We partnered with the city of Boulder to do more research around food waste in our city, and we wanted to see how much food is still going to waste and what kind of impact can we have if we're able to redistribute some of this food. And what we found is that food recovery organizations, between us and our Feeding America Food Bank, who we partner with, we're redistributing 3% of the organic solid waste in the city. And if we were able to increase that to 6%, we would be able to move another 700 tons of food every year. So we're doing a lot, and I think we're serving as a really good model for how food rescues and food banks can partner to try to be as efficient as possible in food recovery. And also there's a lot more to do. And that, again, comes down to building those relationships, doing donor trainings like it was just mentioned earlier in the question that was asked, making sure that grocery stores know how to redistribute food, how to donate it, how to keep it safe, all of that. And there's a lot more work to do around donor trainings and relationship building when it comes to partnering. Some numbers about what we're doing right now. We move about 1,300 pounds of food every day in Boulder by bicycle. We have 10 grocery store donors and 35 recipient organizations. And we've moved about 1.5 million pounds of food in the last 5 years with the power of 150 active volunteers at any given time. Then we've had about 800 volunteers over the course of our 5-year existence. And that's we're in a city of 100,000 people. So to give you a little bit of idea of scale, what that means for us, there's 14 grocery stores here, and we're moving about 1,300 pounds of food a day. So again, we're doing really well, and there's a lot more to do. One way that we're very unique is that we work on a community-based participatory model. So what this means is that we work with different communities to allow them to have a say in how they want to receive food. So on the food waste side of things, we're working with retailers and trying to give as much access to healthy food as possible. On the actual distribution side, this is kind of a more unique model. We don't just have a normal kind of food bank structure. We basically try to bypass barriers to accessing that food and actually work with people so that they can set up their own programs. So the way that we do this is through our grocery program. And what we do is we go directly to low-income housing sites such as senior homes, daycares, family sites, and other just individual housing sites, and we let the residents there run their own grocery program. It looks different at each site. You can see in this picture here that people are basically coming down to shop. At this site in particular, residents basically sort out the food and put it on tables so that their neighbors can come down and shop for that food. At other sites, they might bag it up first, or they might have it, not sorted. It's just kind of totally dependent on who's running it at what program. And so the way that we look at this is that we have this access to healthy food, and then we ask communities if they want to exercise their own power in accessing that. And so this is kind of a piece that sometimes doesn't get talked about when we talk about food rescue, what it means to actually get that food to the hands of people and what that can look like on the recipient side of things. We've definitely found that people don't want all types of food that can be rescued. If we look at an example of bread, there's a lot of bread that we could be redistributing, but there's not as much desire on the side of people and what they want. So finding that match of like, what do people want and how can we redistribute the foods that people want is an important piece of our program. So with that, that's Boulder Food Rescue. And another piece of what we do is try to take as much as we've learned as possible and spread that around. I think that there's a growing movement in food recovery right now in this country. It's exciting times that there is kind of a widespread awareness about food waste and people picking up on it, and so we're just trying to jump into that and try to help food rescue organizations across the country do what they can to address the needs of their community. And so we have 15 members across the country, and actually beyond. Food Rescue Asian is in the Philippines. Loving Spoonful is in Ontario, in Canada, and then we have a group of people in Colorado and Seattle, Jackson Hole, Charlotte, etc. So we're kind of spread out and about, and basically what we do is try to provide resource support. So we have what we call our package deal. It's our how to create a food rescue in your own community. And when people come to us and say, hey, I want to do this, how do we do it? This is like a good place to start. It's kind of what we learned in the first couple of years of starting this food rescue organization, trying to package up and how to do like some different steps along the way. After that, we also provide one-on-one consulting with new food rescue groups. So if somebody's trying to start something up, when barriers come up or ideas come up, they bounce those off of us, and we set up times to just talk through that and make sure that people have the support they need to keep going forward. Also within the network, we have a peer learning network. So what we've learned is that Boulder looks very different than other cities, and each city kind of has its own barriers in a lot of different ways, even though we have common values, and food waste is an issue and food insecurity is an issue, but city by city it's going to look a little different. And so we come together and share that understanding that we have accumulated through doing our work. We address common barriers, we address common successes, and then we try to share as much information as possible. One way that we share this information is through doing bi-monthly workshops. We have we basically get online and then do workshops on whatever members in the network are wanting to learn more about. I listed 3 ideas that we've had and done workshops around: community-driven participatory models. So how do we run grocery programs in our community? How do we work with residents to do that? Volunteer engagement and recruitment and retention, alternative fundraising strategies. These are all ideas that members of the network had that they wanted to learn more about, and then we found people that were experts in those things to teach those workshops. And then lastly, we do document sharing. So if somebody wants to see example documents of budgets or recipient surveys or donor surveys, or how did you do this research around food waste, or how did you do this research around food insecurity in your community, can you help us do that? We share as much information as we can through documents. The second kind of big thing, well, I guess it's 6th on the list now, is technology support. We have a logistics software program we call the Food Rescue Robot, and what this does is manage our day-to-day logistics. We have a schedule that you can track, and you can create the schedule. So from this donor to this recipient on this day is when the shift's going to happen, and we can see what volunteers are on those shifts. And then volunteers go into this web application, and they can see what shifts are available, and they can see information on how to do the shift. So when a volunteer goes in, they can say, oh, Saturday at 5 p.m., that's a great time for me. I'm going to take the shift, and then they are able to get all the information they need to do this. So this is how we basically manage our day-to-day. The volunteers also are able to record data from their pickup. So once a volunteer does a shift, then they can go in and say that was 200 pounds, and this is the type of food I picked up. And then our robot also generates receipts for our grocery store donors. So with all of that data that we accumulate, we can provide a tax-deductible receipt for grocery stores. And so along with providing resource support for other food rescue organizations, this web application is open source, and we have about 15 different organizations using it currently, and we're working to add some new features that help other regions basically use it. So we want to add region-specific features, so if one food rescue does their logistics slightly different than another, then they have the option to be able to use it in a way that works for them. And so here's some more numbers, kind of nationwide, team members. We are picking up 3.13 million pounds so far. And I think, these numbers are interesting, and the pounds being moved around is certainly a good thing. But also, I think, to what I spoke to earlier, there's like a growing movement in food recovery innovation right now. And so what we're really trying to do is how do we share as much information as possible, and how do we have scalability in food rescue when we know that like community-driven programs work really well. And so, I'm excited about this time because I think as we have more and more food rescue organizations that are being innovative, and the millennials are jumping into this scene, there's a lot more focus on sharing information and collaborating with different partners and trying to really find the gaps that we need to address. And so that is just like what we're trying to facilitate through our Food Rescue Alliance. And then I just wanted to say thank you, and if you want to get in contact with me, I listed my email. You can certainly follow us on Facebook or Twitter, and also our website is listed on this slide. You can find our food waste audit on our website as well, and just download it for free, and any other information about us. So that is it for now, and I'd be happy to take questions as well.
Thank you, Hannah. We do have several questions, so we'll get Billy on board here.
All right, Hannah, so we do have a couple of questions. The first one comes from Thomas. He's wondering how much time it takes to do a pickup when it's involved with a supermarket, and how many volunteers are involved with that process. He seems to be concerned about creating extra hassle for these businesses, like you were saying, just wondering about these time limits.
Yeah, so the business is already expecting our volunteers. So our staff works out the relationship with the retailers, and we find a time that works best for them. So we usually pick up every day from a grocery store, sometimes twice a day if they have a lot of food. And our volunteers, if it's a larger shift, we'll have multiple volunteers on it. If it's a smaller shift, we'll have one. And usually a pickup takes about an hour to an hour and a half. So, but that includes going there, picking it up, and biking it somewhere. We're lucky enough in Boulder to have mostly have grocery stores blocks away from where people actually need it, and so we try to keep our bike shifts as short as possible. But from the retailer's end, it usually takes a volunteer or two to go and then load the food and then move it. And usually we do it somewhere out of the way of people, so we're not in the way of people working at the store. We'll pull it aside and then load it up, and it can take 20, 30 minutes depending on, what size the shift is. Does that answer your question?
I believe it does answer the question. So thank you very much. Do you have another question from Carl asking if you've run into any issues with recipients not wanting to accept healthy food because of a preference or habit of eating processed food?
We have not had that experience. We're actually doing a lot of research right now, community-driven research in Boulder around food insecurity and access to food in general, what people's experiences are accessing food. And what we found time and time again is that people actually want more access to fruits and vegetables across the board. And I mean, I'm sure there are some people that have preferences as far as which types of foods they receive. But when we drop off to, let's say, a whole community room, within that community, they'll pick which ones they want. And so there's still an emphasis on individuals having the power of choice, but time and time again, we found that like people actually want access to more healthy food.
Excellent. We still do have a couple more questions. This is a quick one. Melita wonders, is there a charge for the food for the rescue package?
For the Food Rescue Alliance and the robot, or for the food that we're dropping off to the people?
Food Rescue Alliance, I believe, the robot.
Yeah, so we do have a sliding scale membership buy-in, and this helps basically support the cost of keeping the robot up and maintained, and also just the work that we put into doing the workshops, but it's sliding scale based on budget. So if you have a larger budget, then it's a 1.5% of your budget. You know, if it's over $200,000, if you have a smaller budget or you're a startup, we actually give months for free, and it's a very small percentage, so it ends up being $50. So something like that. You know, it's going to vary depending on your budget. So I have more information about that if anybody's interested in learning more.
Excellent. And a couple more questions. When you're selecting agencies to partner with, or when volunteers are selecting agencies to possibly partner with, do you have a certain criteria that you're looking for?
You mean it with our recipient agencies? To make sure.
It's kind of open-ended. So it might be with recipient agencies, it might be with the other agencies across the country.
And maybe donors as well?
Yes.
Okay. I'll try to touch base on all of them maybe.
Yeah. Sorry,
so with donors,
is for recipient agencies.
So it's okay, great. With recipient agencies, basically we let anybody who self-identifies as food insecure apply. We don't do income qualification, but the way that it ends up working out is that we often work with low-income housing sites. So we know that the people at that site are low income because somebody else has already done income qualification in that way. And so we end up working with communities that are specifically for low-income people. And so that's how we kind of we prioritize those sites first. So the grocery programs that I spoke about at low-income housing sites or daycares, basically we saturate them with as much food as they want or can take, given, you know, time and what it takes to make it happen. And then once all of the low-income housing sites and grocery programs are saturated with food, we move to food pantries, soup kitchen, shelters, places like that you kind of normally think of as being a recipient of a food rescue. So we do also take food to food pantries and increase their access to fruits and vegetables that way. Because we are ending up with so much, we end up basically serving both of those kind of sites.
Excellent, thank you. And it looks like we've got one last question for you. We have a couple of people wondering about the bikes. Is there a particular type of cyclist training that goes into the program? How are the bikes equipped to transport food? Are there particular models that you use? Are there things that you supply for the volunteer bikers, or is there any sort of safety guidelines that they have to follow during the program?
Yeah, so we do, we supply the bikes and trailers, and volunteers can basically go to where we keep them, and they have access to the codes to get them, and then they use them for the shift, and then they lock them back up. And we do trainings with our volunteers before they go on shift. So we talk about how to do all that, how to use the bikes and trailers, and then we provide safety vests in lock boxes as well as all the maintenance gear that they need. And so they get a brief training on how to do it, And then we do that in our office, brief training on how basically a shift works and getting them prepped for that. And then they do a training shift with one of our pre-trained trainers, I guess. So we have individuals that train volunteers on their first few shifts to make sure that everything is going well and safe. And once the volunteer feels comfortable with it, then they do it on their own. So we usually have volunteers go through one training shift. Sometimes they prefer to have a person on the second one just for extra safety. And then we let our volunteers say what's safe for them. So this picture of somebody, biking through the snow, that's actually just like a volunteer who's been around for a really long time and feels safe and comfortable doing that. Not all volunteers do, and so we make sure that we're on call when volunteers don't feel safe doing it. And if people don't want to bike shift, we have other options for volunteering. So we have plenty of behind-the-scenes work that people do. We do meals with certain recipient sites where people come and help cook and clean and everything else. We have some car shifts, and so it's as much as possible it's done by bike, and we try to recognize that that is also for a certain demographic and certain able-bodied people, and so we have lots of other options for ways for people that can want to be involved but don't want to bike as well.
How do you recruit your volunteers, Hannah?
We have gotten a lot of volunteers through word of mouth. We also have gotten a lot of local media coverage, and people have found us that way. We do tabling events and speak at panels and movie showings and things like that. There's a university here, CU Boulder, and so sometimes we get volunteers just through the university. At first it was a lot of word of mouth and local press, and now volunteers just find us, every which way, through professors that talk to their classes, or their friend volunteered, and so they came and found us. And so we have a pretty consistent influx of new people wanting to get involved.
Great. All right, just a word on our food recovery project here at NERC. We are putting together a compendium of food recovery models out there, sort of case studies of models around the country. And what I'm finding in a lot of rural communities, there's quite a lot of activity in terms of the traditional food rescue models, a lot of donation drives and donation of canned foods and such, but due to limitations in the number of businesses and grocery stores out there, they don't venture much into perishable foods, and also collection is very limited because there aren't a lot of opportunity in terms of time and volunteers and such. So I would love to hear from communities, small communities and rural communities, and even larger communities. If you have models that can work, that are scalable down to rural and small communities about how to get more perishable food, and if you're doing that, and how you recruit volunteers. I find a lot of rural communities, they operate out of churches, so it's very limited in terms of storage, and they literally have donation drives that bring in food just for that week, and then they distribute it, and they're often only open one day a month. So anyway, if you can email me, athena@nerc.org, any of your models and ideas, that would be wonderful, so that I can put them in the compendium. You will get, obviously, full credit and any hyperlinks that go to your website and information. All right, so, and keep the questions coming, please, and we will move on to Megan. Megan, are you ready?
I'm all set, thanks.
All right, you're on.
Hey everyone, my name is Megan Sheehan Rosen, and I'm the coordinator with Friendship Donations Network. And Friendship Donations Network is a food rescue organization based in Ithaca, New York. And our mission is to rescue fresh, nutritious food from stores and farms that would otherwise be thrown away, and distribute it for free to people in the community who need it most. And we were, FDN has been in Ithaca since 1988. A woman named Sarah Pines started the organization, and essentially because she hates waste. And the focus ever since Sarah started FDN has been on fresh, nutritious food, especially back in the 80s and 90s. Food pantries and food banks had much more non-perishable and processed foods available. Things have gotten a lot better around the country recently in terms of food banks providing produce and fresh foods. But that was, at the start of FDN, that was really the focus and continues to be a central part of our mission to provide the fresh, nutritious food, which to folks who had trouble accessing that. So Sarah led the organization single-handedly for 22 years, and she's responsible for creating the network of food donors and a lot of the distribution programs and volunteers as well. So she established the relationship with a lot of the grocery stores in Ithaca, convincing them to donate their unsaleable food rather than throwing it away. And then in 2010, Sarah retired and she brought together a group of people to serve as the board of directors for FDN to provide some stability and continuity for what she had created over those 2 decades. And so they incorporated as a 501c3 nonprofit organization, and at that point hired a part-time coordinator. And this is now where we're at today. So we're still a very lean organization and really essentially try to do a lot with a little. So we have a very modest budget, and again, just one part-time paid position. And the bulk of the organization is really run by volunteers. So this shows you what the flow of the organization looks like in terms of where the food comes from and where it goes. We have a relationship with most of the grocery stores in Ithaca and other food outlets, really anywhere that has food that's still good but that they can't sell. We have a great relationship with a lot of the local farmers during the growing season. We have volunteers who go to the farmers market at the end of the day with empty boxes and offer the vendors to donate things that they haven't sold, which may otherwise end up being composted if they don't have another way to sell them. We have a project called Neighborhood Food Hubs, which I'm going to talk about a bit more in detail in a couple minutes. And that project was designed to make it easy for home gardeners and people with CSA shares to be able to donate extra produce that they had. And then in Ithaca, we have 2 colleges, Cornell University and Ithaca College, and we also have relationships with them, primarily to receive food donations before school break, and then occasionally throughout the semester as well. And actually that was a relatively new over the last couple of years. We have partnered with the Cornell chapter of the Food Recovery Network, which began a couple of years ago, and as Athena mentioned, so students going into the campus kitchens, the dining halls, and packaging up the food that has never been put out on the line. So we serve as the community partner for the Food Recovery Network. And then also up at Cornell, there is the Statler Hotel, and for the last 2 years we've been partnering with them. They were just composting the extra food that they had, and then it was actually a Cornell student that told them about. Said, hey, did you know there's a food recovery, food rescue organization in Ithaca? And so they were thrilled to be able to donate the food rather than have it be composted. So that's a weekly. Both the Food Recovery Network and the Statler Hotel are both weekly donations. But by far the bulk of the food donations we deal with come through our grocery stores. And we have really the way that the FDN operations work is we have 7 days a week, actually every day of the year except Christmas when all of the stores are closed. So 364 days a year, we have programs scheduled to pick up directly from the food donors and take the food out to the distribution site. We just in the last 3 years, now have a central storage facility for FDN, which was the first time. So for the first 25 years, the organization didn't actually have a roof over our head. And we primarily functioned off of the loading dock behind the Wegmans grocery store, which is our anchor. Wegmans is our anchor donor and largest grocery store in Ithaca. And so we're really fortunate to have the support from them and the partnership with them. We look like a very different organization without Wegmans. So, but for the most part, the food pantries or whichever food distribution program is on the schedule for the day are responsible for providing their own volunteers with their own vehicles to do the rounds and pick up from all of the food donors and then take the food out to the distribution site. And so again, it's really quick turnaround time, which allows us to handle highly perishable foods because it's not, as Hannah had mentioned too, it's not going back to a warehouse and getting sent out from there, but usually within a matter of hours, it'll go from the donor site to actually going home with somebody. And so the role that Friendship Donations Network plays as sort of that liaison between the food donors and the recipients allows the donors to have a reliable single point of contact. So we have somebody available. We have the one phone number which is staffed 7 days a week, including weekends and holidays, so that if somebody wants to call about a perishable donation, we can usually respond within hours and send out on-call volunteers to pick up that food and see that it gets out to somebody who needs it right away. So some of the food donors are regularly scheduled, and that we've set that up, and they expect us to be there at a certain time each day. And then others are on call. They'll call us as needed. And again, as Hannah had mentioned too, really we want to emphasize that making it as easy as possible and as convenient as possible for the donors, and kind of meeting them where they're at. So now that we have, I mentioned now just in the last 3 years, we have a central storage facility that allows us now, when we receive one of those calls outside of the normal schedule, we now have a place to store the food, and we have our CoolBot, which is an energy efficient walk-in cooler that runs on an air conditioner unit, a really great piece of technology. And so that's essentially a walk-in cooler that allows us to store the perishable foods that come in, which is really important because a lot of the food distribution programs we work with may not have their own dedicated space, and certainly a lot of them don't have their own way to refrigerate food. So they rely on FDN to be able to store the perishable food properly until they're ready to pick it up. So we're continuing to see the benefits of having that space to, and increase storage to be able to accept food donations. Like one example, actually, a couple Decembers ago, like December 23rd, Cornell University campus was shutting down for winter break, and they called, and we sent up like 7 or 8 volunteers with their own vehicles to fill up their cars with all the food that the campus dining halls had. That wasn't going to last until the students came back, and the other, food banks and regional partners were on vacation for that week, and so we were able to respond quickly and send people up, and I pretty much filled up our storage facility from floor to ceiling that time. So, and then just to speak a bit about where it comes through from the food donor and then to the recipients. The food is distributed through, we have a network of food pantries, Loaves and Fishes, which is our community kitchen serving meals 5 days a week. And then we have a lot of relationships with community-based nonprofit organizations. And this is a group that's constantly changing, new programs coming on as they learn about FDN and about the fact that free, healthy food is available for their clients. So really, we just see our role as trying to prevent good food from being wasted and then get it out to people who can use it. So again, no questions asked, and we are always looking to build those relationships with people and programs in the community that can help make food available to people who can use it. So in addition to the food pantries, we also have some more informal distribution, some volunteers that will bring food to lower income housing communities and senior housing communities, also after school programs, and a lot of informal distribution, mobile home parks. Again, just trying to, as Hannah had mentioned too, like breaking down those barriers to access and seeing food get out to people. So just to share a little bit about the numbers, we are rescuing about 1,000 pounds of food every day, and that food is going to about 2,000 people each week through our partnerships with the food distribution programs, and it's roughly about 500,000 pounds diverted from the landfill each year. And I just want to emphasize too that the volunteer aspect of FDN really allows us to, like I said, respond quickly and throughout like every day of the year with our network of volunteers. They provide a lot of that flexibility and being able to respond. So this picture is a couple of our volunteers picking up from the Ithaca Farmers Market, which we do throughout the growing season every Saturday and Sunday, picking up, which ends up being a significant amount of the produce that we have available during these months. So now to share a bit about the neighborhood food hubs. This is a project that we started in 2013, and the idea was to make it easy for people with home gardens or who belong to CSAs to donate that extra produce that they would have. Now the idea with FDN having that one phone number, so anybody could call any time to make a donation. But if you imagine having a few tomatoes or some greens from your garden, it's not as efficient to make the phone call and make arrangements for a pickup or drop off. But if you could just walk down the street to your neighbor's house and drop off your veggies into their cooler in front of their house, then you're probably much more likely to do that. So this concept for the neighborhood food hubs came out of a conversation with our volunteers, and we were trying to think about how we could increase the amount of fresh fruits and vegetables to have available for the food programs. And that tends to be consistently the feedback that we get from the food programs is, when asked like what they want more of, the produce is consistently what we hear. So that's how this came about. And we started off in 2013 as a pilot project with just 4 neighborhood food hubs right in downtown Ithaca and residential neighborhoods and people. And so essentially what it was, the neighborhood food hub consists of a typical medium to large size camping cooler stocked with ice packs, and then a yard sign like you see in the picture. And each hub would be active 1 day a week. And the person hosting the hub would put out the cooler in the morning with the ice packs, and then at the end of the day, that volunteer would transfer the food to the FDN CoolBot, and then the food would get distributed through our normal distribution schedule, typically going out the next day. So that first year, people donated 700 pounds of mostly vegetables, which was great. But beyond the numbers, the reception from the community was just so enthusiastic. People really loved this idea. And it really got FDN on the map in a way that we hadn't been before. Although, we've been in the community since 1988, kind of function relatively low profile, volunteers picking up food off of loading docks or receiving areas around the back of the stores. So unless you're doing that and, directly involved with that activity, a lot of people still didn't know about us. So this was a way for individuals and residents in the community to be able to contribute. And then especially too, like people growing their own food or supporting their local farms, those people were, even more connected to and invested in that that locally grown food and wanting to share it with their neighbors. So each year, one of the cool things about this project is it's been really, truly grassroots. We've done hardly any recruitment in terms of getting people involved, and instead it's been people coming to us and saying, hey, I love this idea, I'd really like to get involved, whether it be hosting a hub or helping to transfer the food. So each year, the number of neighborhood food hubs has grown, and it's now throughout Tompkins County, which is where we're located, and even one neighborhood food hub outside of the county in a neighboring community. And one of the things that's changed over the years is whenever possible, we have the food that is donated stay within the community where it was donated. So within the same town, if there's a local food pantry or a place where the food can be distributed, we have it stay there. And that's been actually another really attractive part of the project. Is we've heard feedback from people who really like the idea of feeling like they're sharing food with their neighbors and helping to feed their own community. So whenever possible, we have the food. Sometimes it's distributed right on site. Like one example is one of the hubs is located at a public library that also hosts a Healthy Tuesdays food giveaway. So they chose Tuesday as their neighborhood food hub day, and then the food was just distributed that same evening, right on site, and never had to be brought anywhere. So since over the 4 seasons, and the project runs from July 1st through October 1st, which for upstate New York, that's kind of the heart of the growing season. You may have noticed there on the numbers for 2016 was a bit lower than last year, and there's a couple reasons for that. One is we had a severe drought this year, which meant some challenges for local growing. A lot of people couldn't water their gardens for fear that their wells would dry up. So that was part of it. And actually another part of it was one of our local farms and CSAs was donating some of their extra produce that was left over from the CSA was getting counted with the local neighborhood food hub in their town. And this year they were still donating, but it actually got counted with the farmers market donations instead. So just to explain that number. And this is an example of some of the the outreach that we put together for the project. We simply just created a Google map to populate with each of the hub locations where they're located, and then the day of the week and the times that they're active. So we had that Google map available on the FDN website, and then printed versions as well. And then you can see there the kind of simple steps. So really simple. This project spawned from the idea of a volunteer, and has it's grown significantly, but we've really kept it as simple as possible, and really hasn't cost hardly any money at all. We had some coolers that were donated, and we purchased some yard signs, but it's been a pretty simple and efficient program. And so there you go. I'm happy to answer any questions, and our website there has a lot more information about us as well.
Great. Thank you, Megan. All right, we do have a couple of questions.
Yeah, so Megan, so the first question is for the neighborhood food hubs. You talked a lot about how it makes it easier for CSAs or for home growers, but are neighborhood food hubs also allowed to accept unwanted purchased food? So food from supermarkets. They may also be talking about particular pre-prepared foods or processed foods.
Yeah, I think we had one occasion where somebody called and said, hey, I had a barbecue. We have a bunch of hamburger buns left over. Is it okay to drop that off? And so, yeah, certainly that's fine. Like I had said, FDN is available to accept donations anytime. And we also have at our local cooperative Natural Foods Market, they have a bin dedicated for donations for FDN so that anybody in the community can stop by and drop, generally speaking, non-perishable foods off there as another convenient option. So yeah, absolutely. And I think, one other thing to add to that is people, because they learned about the neighborhood food hubs, now, even though that project only lasts, for 3 months from July through October, we end up getting more calls throughout the year because people know now that we'll accept food donations. So it's really kind of sparked the consciousness of people in a way so that we will get other food donations beyond just the garden veggies.
Excellent. Thank you, Megan. We have another question asking if volunteers have the ability to keep any of the recovered food. This was asked early on in the presentation before the food hubs.
If volunteers can keep any of the food for themselves?
Yes.
I believe that is the question, yes.
We have a policy of the food, of volunteers not taking food for themselves, really because we have about 50 volunteers that work directly with FDN, but then if you look at the network as a whole, including all of the partner programs, there's well over 200 volunteers. So if you imagine, everybody taking a little bit for themselves, then very quickly there's not enough left for the programs that are relying on the donations. And so we have a general policy of the food, and also just for the, sort of integrity for the people who are making, businesses, farmers, or individuals who are making the donation, they're making it with the understanding that the food is going to people who can't afford, can't afford that food otherwise. So our general policy is the food is for the programs and not for volunteers. If we had, again, with our primary goal being reducing food waste, if we do end up with like a tremendous excess of bread, which happens from time to time, in that case, before, again, looking back at the food recovery hierarchy, before seeing that food go to animals or compost, we will at that point say, hey, anybody who can take bread, please do that. But if we can make sure that it's getting out to the programs it's intended for, then that's the top priority.
Excellent, thank you. Another question comes from one of our viewers. So there seems to be this process where individuals who might not have direct access to healthy foods or to fresh produce might not know what to do with that produce or how to consume it. So the question is, what types of produce are you mostly seeing as a donation? And do you offer things such as cooking classes or recipes for individuals to use to help increase their knowledge of how to prepare those foods?
Yeah, that's a great question. That's something that comes up. Ithaca and Tompkins County is really rich in resources and wonderful programs with great initiatives. And so we, again, because we are relatively limited in our human capacity and try to, keep our mission simple and do that, we do partner with other local organizations like the Cooperative Extension. They offer cooking classes and a number of other programs locally who do some of that. And so we make sure that the programs that we're working with on the food distribution side of things know what those resources are and know how to access them and sort of serve as the connecting piece between those two. But we have done some. There's a wonderful food waste cookbook. I think it's called Amazing Waste. It's a PDF that was just. I was made aware of just earlier this year, and so that's something that we're, stuff like that, where ideas about what to do with maybe some of the imperfect foods are just really great resourceful ideas for what to do with some of the foods we see. Something like that, we'll make available and make sure that the programs we're working with have. We did also, we have printed off what we call the veggie ID cards, which were quarter sheet size cards, which had a picture of the fruit or vegetable on one side and then the other side had tips of how to store it and how to prepare it. And those were really popular items. I mean, volunteers, programs, everybody who saw those wanted to have, have that available. And so we have done some of that, certainly to make sure that that people knew what to do. But that's one of the things too with the way the organization is working at this point is the programs that are picking up food from FDN typically certainly know like how many people they're going to be serving and what types of food are most desired. So it works pretty well kind of organically to have to make sure the food is getting enjoyed and put to use.
Do your food shelves or who the organizations that you distribute to, Megan, do they cook the food ever, the perishable produce, or they freeze it or anything like that?
I would say the vast majority is food going home, like as a grocery, going home with people to do their own cooking at home. There are, like I mentioned, those community partnerships, and we do have a few, like the Mental Health Association locally has a peer support program, and they do a community meal together every week. And there's another program, a peer support group for people who had been incarcerated and are returning to the community, and they have a weekly meal. So programs like that, we provide food to. That's a great option for some of those prepared foods I mentioned from the Cornell and the Statler Hotel, because then they just need to heat them up. But then we do have others that other community groups that will actually prepare a meal and take the raw ingredients and make it into a meal like once a week for the our local emergency shelter. So I would say the vast majority is people taking the food home with them, but there are certainly examples where the food is being made into meals too. Oh, and Loaves and Fishes, which is our local community kitchen, a great organization. They're probably the biggest example of taking the ingredients and making it into a meal.
Great. And then you said that cookbook was called Amazing Waste?
Yeah, it is. And I can email a copy of that PDF to you if you're interested.
That'd be excellent. I'd post it on our website. That would be great.
Yeah.
And a question for both you and Hannah. How do you train your volunteers? Do you offer any kind of training in particular?
We do a brief orientation to get them familiar with how the organization works, and then we'll typically have them join us for one of the regular shifts, whether it be transferring food or sorting food. But it's usually just shadowing somebody for a time or two, and then they're on their own.
And do you train them to interface with the donators in terms of safety precautions and food handling and such?
For the most part, I serve as the primary point of contact for our donors. Some of them that have been doing this for so many years, and that's kind of the best case scenario, because really when it comes down to it, it's all about relationships and community. So some of our volunteers, have kind of taken on that role and do have those relationships. But for the most part, I would say it ends up being myself as the liaison.
And how about you, Hannah?
Yeah, we're really similar. Like everything Megan said, we totally resonate with and kind of make it run similarly. We train our volunteers. We do an in-house one, and then we have them go out with the trainer and understand how to do it. And then our program director is the person kind of building the relationships with the donors. So volunteers, of course, have will interact with them when they go to do their pickup. But we just say, of course, be respectful and relay any information that you might receive to us, and let us know if anything comes up, kind of thing.
Okay. All right. See. Oh, okay. So we do have another cookbook that was listed from gibbs-lab.com, and that was provided from one of our viewers. So I will post that as well on our website. And seeing no more questions, I will remind you to please, please, please take the survey that you will get at the end of the webinar. There's also a handout that we uploaded. You can download. It's on wasted food reduction tips. And that was the amazing waste PDF that I just got. So good, I will post that on our website. And then download the wasted food reduction tip sheet from the webinar. We will post the webinar presentations and the recordings on the NERC website, and you'll have a link to that. Please send me your case study examples and any ideas for our compendium. And look forward to another webinar that will be coming out probably in January or February. And thank you very much to our presenters and Billy, and thank you very much for attending our webinar. Have a good afternoon.